Welcome to Connection. I'm Pastor Phil Emerson. Joining me on this Connection program is my co-host and dear friend Jerry Scott. We're in the midst of a series of programs on the church. You see, the church is in trouble. People are leaving the church in record numbers, and fewer new young people are turning to the church for their resources and help. In this Connection program, we're going to look at another reason why we think the church needs to correct itself, and how it can correct itself to be alive in this new age. Our program is entitled, Just the Facts. Jerry?
Thanks, Phil. You know, remember Sergeant Joe Friday from the 1950s television show Dragnet? He was famous for saying, "Just give me the facts, ma'am. Nothing but the facts." At the end of the show, his analysis of the facts always enabled him to catch the bad guy. You know, it seems logical to us today that certain facts can bring us to our goal too. While adding up the facts might bring us from point A to point B in many areas of life, it may not be true in matters of the spirit. But the enemy has convinced dying Christians and dying churches that all they need are the facts. The facts found in this study or that study, or the facts found in this sermon or that book, to bring them back to life. He's convinced us that the same only the facts technique that Joe Friday so successfully used to catch the bad guy will enable us today to catch Jesus. One day, a person widely recognized as being deeply spiritual came in from his work among the people and found several visitors waiting for him. They'd made the long journey to his simple cottage to learn something about his inner life, a few facts that would help them learn how he was able to live so closely the life of love and service and compassion that Jesus lived and taught. They all brought their Bibles and their Bible commentaries and their notebooks and other books written by various authors, each with his own idea about what it really meant to follow Jesus. Surely here, they thought, surely here in the presence of this unmistakable Christian person, they could find the answer, the facts that they traveled so far to get. Here they'd find the facts that would enable them to lead the Christian life they'd only dreamed about. After some polite introductions, they began to question the man. As they spoke, their words were sprinkled with quotations from this source or that source, or from this verse or that verse, or quotation after fact after fact. Finally, after a long time, the man looked up at his visitors and said softly, "What good are all your facts and your devotions? What good are all your memorized verses and your spiritual theories? What good are all your books? What good are your extravagant buildings for worship? Does a donkey become wise because he lives in a library? Or does a cat become holy because he lives in a church?" The visitors were stunned. They were shocked at his words. This was not the message they had come to hear. After a while, one said, well, if we don't need more spiritual knowledge, if we don't need more facts about the life and times of Jesus and those he touched, if we don't need these things, then what do we need? The man smiled at them and said, "You don't need the information of books. You need the transformation of Jesus, the transformation of the heart." Well, how do we get that? They said. How do we get it? The Christian person would not say. He was wise enough to know that they really weren't ready to hear the answer. He knew that whatever it was that he would say, they would turn it into a church or a seminary subject or study course to be learned. He excused himself and went back to his work among the people. You know, Christians today are hungry for facts, hungry for information about Jesus. The shelves of bookstores are filled with the ideas of this author or that, each with his own thoughts about what it takes to be a Christian person. Our church and home libraries are filled with such books. We've become worshipers of information because the enemy has told us that information is the key to everything. He's told us that knowledge is power. And in time, as more and more information is made available, we can know everything. Once we have enough information about the body, we can wipe out disease. Well, once we know about electronics, we can build a better world. The enemy has even led us to believe that knowledge is also the key to becoming a better Christian. So we attend this Bible study or that Bible study in the hopes that one more little tidbit of information, one more fact, will push us over the top and will step out into the true light of Christianity. Now, I want to pause here in the midst of this little monologue to say that I'm aware I'm dealing with a very tricky subject, one with implications so subtle that if I'm not very careful, you might misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that learning is bad, that it's negative. I'm not saying that Bible studies are unprofitable. I'm not saying that even some of those contemporary Christian books with titles like Sharing Jesus Over Sweet Rolls will yield nothing of value. On the contrary, learning in any form is good from any source. It's a powerful and wonderful thing. And we should always be anxious to learn. But here's the point. And if you remember only one sentence of everything I have said, remember this. You cannot learn your way into the kingdom of God the same way you learn your way into a university. But the enemy has convinced us that we can. The enemy's told us that there's only one kind of learning that changes the mind. The enemy has convinced us that the path to spiritual transformation is the same as the path that leads to any other sort of worldly goal. Namely, once you read everything about it and can answer all kinds of questions about it, you've achieved your goal. Well, it might work that way with electrical engineering or nuclear physics, but it's not going to work that way with things of the Spirit. We can know everything about the life of Jesus, everything, who he was, what he taught, and be able to recite the Bible from memory cover to cover and still be as far away from the Christian experience as the north is from the south. In matters of the Spirit, the enemy talks about transformed minds, but Jesus talks about transformed hearts, and they're very different things. The church that has been seduced by the enemy spends more time in study than in service. The Christian that's been seduced by the enemy will pass by a person in need on the way to their Bible study. All the teachings in all our educational systems today are primarily designed to change your mind, to transform our minds. In contrast, every single word that Jesus spoke was not to transform the mind, but to transform the heart. The leader of an adult Sunday school class had met a friend from his past while he was waiting on a street corner. And he said, "So," he said, "I was delighted to hear the other day that you have recently become a Christian." "Yes, yes, yes," was the enthusiastic reply. "You know, there's so much to know about Jesus. For example, do you know when he was born?" "No." "Well, do you know how tall he was?" "No." "How many sermons he preached?" "I don't know." "Do you know how old he was when he died?" "No, I don't." "Or what country he was born in?" No, I'm afraid I don't know that either." "Well," he said, "look, don't worry," said the Sunday school teacher. "I'd like to invite you to my Sunday school class. You can learn all about Jesus there." "Thanks for your invitation," the friend said. "You know, I really am ashamed at how little I do know about Jesus. But if you have just a minute, I'd like to tell you what I do know." 2 years ago, I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. I was killing my family and myself. My wife and children never knew if I'd come home at night and would dread the hour when I did. Then, Jesus Christ transformed my life. Today, my addictions are gone. My home is mending because I've given my heart to God. Jesus Christ has given me a new life. This is what I know of Him. In that moment, the Sunday school teacher's life was changed. The living Spirit of Christ touched his life in a way that his books and knowledge and studies could never do. This story clearly illustrates the point. One person was full of the Spirit and empty of knowledge. The other was full of knowledge and empty of the Spirit. And in a moment, the awesome life-changing power of the Spirit put a lifetime's accumulation of facts in perspective. And here's the paradox. Here's the puzzle. Here's the secret that the enemy has hidden from dying churches and dying Christians. To really know has little to do with knowledge and everything to do with experience. If each day we pray for more and more of the experience of Christianity, we'll find that our lives and the life of our church will begin to come alive in ways we can't even imagine. On the other hand, if we continue to search for Jesus in the pristine world of information, in the end, like Joe Friday, we'll have nothing but the facts. What do you think about that? Think about nothing but the facts.
Nothing, I think you're absolutely right. I think that this church, every church, has to make a decision, and that decision is clearly laid out. And what is the decision? Is our faith a matter of what we think, how we think it, some ideas that we can string together? Or is the Christian experience profoundly a matter of what we experience? Are we just Christians in our head, or are we Christians of our heart? Jerry, you know, I think that the church can easily get caught up in this dilemma. And one of the things that I'd like to ask you is, do you think we like to mess around with this accumulation of data simply to avoid ever becoming transformed people?
It gives us something to do, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, because we can spend a lifetime accumulating the data.
It is far easier and it is far less risky to attend a Bible study than it is to serve at a soup kitchen or a free clinic or to help someone that you happen to see on the street. It's much easier to study and think and.
Yeah, it's easier because why? Because one, you are really living out of that other person's experience. It doesn't require much of you.
There's no risk.
You can sit and listen. Two, I suppose, if you don't like what you hear, you can just let it flow out the other ears, so to speak. You can just let it go on and not be transformed. And do you really think that how has the church done this though to our folks? Have we set up this notion that you got to develop a good database, before you dare step out? And
I think so.
Yeah.
And that could come out of the whole theological school,
sure.
Concept where preachers are required before they can get out and preach. They're required to go through all this academic stuff, and
Yeah. And then sometimes we quite arrogantly flaunt that too, and we kind of say to the lady, well, I've been to theological school, therefore I know all about this stuff. And yet, tragically, we have pastors.
I can read the Old Testament in Greek and Aramaic.
Yeah.
Sure.
And yet, tragically, what you say is so hauntingly true. We have pastors who have been now educated in our best theological seminaries who know nothing of what you're talking about when you talk about a transformed heart.
Now, am I crazy about this? I mean, is this a crazy idea, Phil? Or
No, it is not. It's not only is it not crazy, but it's right at the point of it seems to me. And the point of it is that every one of us really must decide whether the way, and maybe we should go back to that, because Jesus never talked about him. The early Christians, let me say it correctly, never talked about their faith. They called it the way. You know, there was a way, and that the Nazarene had introduced the way, and they were followers of the way, which implies that there was a way of living, a way of caring, a way of sharing that was unique and profound. The West, we had to
turn it into a study course.
Now, you know, the caution, I think, and that's the right one, obviously we're not debunking study courses. You are probably the best read person I know, Jerry, so I know you're not debunking books. We're not calling ourselves to be the know-nothing empty heads again. That's not what this is about.
No.
We're simply focusing people on the fact that, look, it's not what you know.
It's what you do.
It's what you do.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and that doing is a matter of the heart.
You know, if you had to be some sort of an intellectual giant to be a Christian, you know, only Harvard graduates and Yale graduates, you know, would be Christian people. But God makes the Christian experience available to everybody, and it's not what you know. It's the compassion in your heart, what you do, how you relate to other people. That seems to me to be the key.
I would just suggest a psychological subtlety about what you said too, which is that it seems to me that knowledge is primarily something that I control. And I wonder if not in the depths of our psyche, we treat religion, we treat our experience with God as a knowledge issue, because that way we stay in charge. Not only do we stay in charge by holding this knowledge, we also can separate ourselves from others who do not. And none of that is a part of the life and faith that Jesus taught. Quite to the contrary, that the only power is from God, and that we're simply servants of that power. It is amazing to me that knowledge today has become so separated from right conduct. You look at Millikan. He was educated in the finest schools that we had in this country. His IQ was off the charts, and yet he was a genius. And yet, with all that education, with all that brilliance, he did not know it was wrong to steal. And this is so shaken. This is so shaken, the quote educational system, that now they're in this great rush to try to understand why education didn't produce values. And I wonder if that's not in also going along with your point, Jerry, that you can know everything. You can know all about the Bible. And a lot of Christians do, but if you are not a transformed person, if you're not a person of the heart, if you're not a person of service, you're just missed it.
You know, one of my favorite thoughts, and I know I've expressed this on Connection before, was by a cellist, a man by the name of Pablo Casals. And he was a man that knew something about you know, the heart and so on. And he said, and he talked about the educational system, you know, and he said, in school we teach our children that 2 and 2 are 4, that 6 and 6 are 12, and that Paris is the capital of France and Washington is the capital. When will we ever teach them who they are? When will we ever teach them that they are unique individuals with special gifts? You know, I think one of the failings of education is we just sort of measure the amount of knowledge that we can stack up in people, and rather than to affirm people as individuals with special gifts that nobody else can have. And
church follows right along in this failure of education too, because I think church has played that game. we just kind of think if we put our kids through church school, or we get them a few Bible verses, or we give them some knowledge about what the church is about, that's going to be enough to make them a whole person. You know, and if what you're telling us is correct, that has nothing to do much with making them a whole person.
What are you thinking?
I agree. I think that becoming a whole person is becoming a transformed individual. You know, and to be transformed means you've got to get into the world and get involved in it. You got to roll up your sleeves. You know, knowledge is kind of clean. Experience is kind of dirty. Knowledge, you kind of can stay objective, stay at distance. Experience, you got to get in there and rough and tumble. And the faith has to be transmitted through the rough and tumble, through real living, through real sacrifice. And maybe this is why the church is not doing a good enough job with its, to quote, make converts. There was a little article, Jerry, I clipped it out of the news. They were talking to some, and I guess I don't know her, but an actress, and somehow got on religion, and she made the statement that she was not taking out any stock in God, Inc. Now, and by Inc, I-N-C, period, God Incorporated. And when they quizzed her, and she said, what do you mean by that remark? She said, well, she says, I think I know who God is, and I think I know what God wants me to do, but religion confuses me. And therefore I am not going to be supportive of religion. And how shameful it is. And I suppose the one thing that knowledge and this whole point that I would see is that, yeah, we can play the knowledge game and get real confused about all sorts of things, because the library is full of knowledge other Christians have tried to impart, and you could spend your whole lifetime and not even put a dent in it. But in a moment of caring, of reaching out to another human being, in a moment of serving,
the transformation takes place.
In a moment of servanthood, one can get it all and understand it.
It is
and not even know that they have it all, maybe beautifully. How powerful it is, when we are willing to see and understand that the facts of the matter may be killing us, but the life of the matter is a wellspring of life that can bubble up again and again and again.
You know, Phil, I remember it's been a couple of years now, I guess, since we've been doing Connection. We were first talking about it, talking about maybe the title, what it was going to be, and we came up with the title Connection, and that is what it really is all about. You know, at some point in your life, and you go to church and you listen, at some point in your life, you know, you make this connection. You say, you know, this stuff makes a difference. It should make a difference in the way I live and the way I think. And when you make that connection and begin to step out and work with that thing, you can begin to see what it's all about. And that's the only way you can see what it's all about. I don't think you can see, you know, in the pristine world, as we said, of...
And as we go into this new, you know, the church is right on the, you know, the brink of 2000, and this is a whole new time, you know. Often in the changes of these periods, there has been tremendous historic shifts and changes, and of course, right now we're underway with the transformation of Europe and the breakdown of an old nemesis for America anyway, called communism. So who knows what transformations in the next 9 years will be like. The church is also undergoing transformation. It's losing members. It is very painful. That's very painful to the church. It seems to not to speak with authority anymore within the life of people. And I wonder if it is the fact that we have not shown people a way to live, but yet we maybe have just given them our creeds and given them our booklets and given them a bunch of words on the page. And
the church hasn't made the connection.
Hasn't made the connection,
no.
Has it? You know, and that the hope that we have, and that the purpose of the church has to be to bring alive this sense of experience of God. And to probably, I think, to learn along the way. I think there's still going to be a place for people who want to read and want to study and want to get into their Bibles and want to find out more about what it is. But I think it will be more journeying along the way. Do you think, Jerry?
I hope so.
You know, I hope so too. what are we talking about? We're talking about the facts. We're talking about the transformed heart. We're asking ourselves whether or not one can get so caught up in the pilgrimage to knowledge, so caught up in study and reflection, that actually you can fail to get the point of it all, which is to become a transformed person. And more than just to have become a transformed person, Jesus taught us to become a servant person. And what he meant by that, I think, was he meant to open our hearts in compassion and love towards others. How can we as a church rekindle our life? How can we revitalize our sagging spirits? How can we bring our congregation back to a sense that we're following in God's footsteps?
I think it's easy. I mean,
tell us, Jerry.
I think it's very easy. It's very easy to say, but perhaps difficult to do. And we've also talked about this. You know, the way to do it is to read some scripture and say, okay, now what does this mean to me, and what is this saying to me, and perhaps what action can I take as a result of reading this? What can I do? And you know, one of my favorite little verses is paragraphs is found in Matthew, and we've talked about this on Connection, where it says, "I was hungry, and you fed me."
That's right.
See? I mean, within that verse, I was naked and you clothed me, I was sick and you comforted me, I was in prison and you visited. Within that whole thing lies the life of the church.
Absolutely. The power will return to the church.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's one thing
when we're willing to become partners on the way.
Right. Now, it's one thing to be able to say, okay, now here's a question for you, here's a little quiz. What part of the Bible is this verse found in? I was hungry and you fed me. Do you know the answer to that? And what difference does it make?
That's right. It makes none.
It makes no difference.
That isn't transforming lives.
No, no. That's information, you know. Okay.
But what a difference it will make if you went out and fed somebody.
You want to see where the magic of that verse is? You want to see where the life of the Bible is? Just try it sometime, huh?
Well, I hope, Jerry, that I'm a person who is more in touch with the experience of Christ that you talked about in your story.
I hope I am too, and I hope that I continue to grow in experience.
And I hope that we can be a part of a church that is going to renew and restore itself because we are committed, absolutely committed, to being on the way with Jesus. Well, thank you for listening to this Connection program. I hope you'll join Jerry Scott and myself again when we take a look at another aspect of the church and ask ourselves the important questions. Maybe the important question, are we making the connection with a living God? Join us next time, won't you?